She does not get eaten by the sharks at this time, my father said. I looked up at him. What? You looked like you were getting too involved and bothered, so I thought I would let you relax. Oh, for Pete's sake, I said. You'd think I was a baby or something. What kind of stuff is that? I really sounded put out, but I'll tell you the truth. I was getting a little too involved, and I was glad he told me. I mean, when you're a kid, you don't think, well, since the book's called The Princess Bride, and since we're barely into it, obviously the author's not about to make shark kibble of his leading lady. You get hooked on things when you're a youngster, so to any youngsters reading, I'll simply repeat my father's words, since they worked to soothe me. She does not get eaten by the sharks at this time. I'm kind of remembering the movie I thought had eels or like something, or maybe that's later in the book. It may be later in the movie, but I could have sworn it was like shrieking eels or something like that. I'm just gonna adjust this a little bit. It's moderately better. Yeah, I thought it was eels, but maybe that's a different part of the story. But eels, sharks, like, same kind of, like, they had the same function, so I guess it doesn't really matter. But I'm curious why they would change it. If they did change it. Maybe I'm just misremembering. Then the sharks went mad. All around her, Buttercup could hear them beeping and screaming and thrashing their mighty tails. Nothing can save me, Buttercup realized. I'm a dead cookie. Fortunately for all concerned, save the sharks, it was around this time that the moon came out. There she is, shouted the Sicilian, and like lightning the Spaniard turned the boat, and as the boat drew close, the Turk reached out a giant arm, and then she was back in the safety of her murderers, while all around them the sharks bumped each other in wild frustration. Keep her warm, the Spaniard said from the tiller, tossing his cloak to the Turk. Don't catch cold, the Turk said, wrapping Buttercup into the cloak's folds. Doesn't seem to matter all that much, she answered, since you're killing me at dawn. He'll do the actual work, the Turk said, indicating the Sicilian, who was wrapping cloth around his cuts. We'll just hold you. Hold your stupid tongue, the Sicilian commanded. The Turk immediately hushed. I don't think he's so stupid, Buttercup said. And I don't think you're so smart either, with all your throwing blood in the water. That's not what I would call grade A thinking. It worked, didn't it? You're back, aren't you? The Sicilian crossed toward her. Once women are sufficiently frightened, they scream. But I didn't scream. The moon came out, answered Buttercup, somewhat triumphantly. The Sicilian struck her. Enough of that, the Turk said then. The tiny humpback looked dead at the giant. Do you want to fight me? I don't think you do. No, sir, the Turk mumbled. No, but don't use force, please. Force is mine. Strike me if you feel the need. I won't care. The Sicilian returned to the other side of the boat. She would have screamed, he said. She was about to cry out. My plan was ideal, as all my plans are ideal. It was the moon's ill timing that robbed me of perfection. He scowled unforgivingly at the yellow wedge above them. Then he stared ahead. There, the Sicilian pointed. The cliffs of insanity. And there they were, rising straight and sheer from the water 1,000 feet into the night. They provided the most direct route between Florin and Gilder, but no one ever used them, sailing instead the long way, many miles around. Not that the cliffs were impossible to scale. 2 men were known to have climbed them in the last century alone. Sail straight for the steepest part, the Sicilian commanded. The Spaniard said, I was. Buttercup did not understand. Going up the cliffs could hardly be done, she thought, and no one had ever mentioned secret passages through them. Yet here they were, sailing closer and closer to the mighty rocks, now surely less than a quarter mile away. For the first time, the Sicilian allowed himself a smile. All is well. I was afraid your little jaunt in the water was going to cost me too much time. I had allowed an hour of safety. There must still be 50 minutes of it left. We are miles ahead of anybody, and safe. No one could be following us yet? The Spaniard asked. No one, the Sicilian assured him. It would be inconceivable. He said the thing. He said the thing, guys. My love for the movie makes me, like, when I get to parts in the book, I'm like, here it comes. I know what's happening. But I do like that there are some differences between the book and the movie. So it's weird because, like, when a book gets turned into a movie, a lot of times people are like, oh, like they judge it on how faithful it is as like a recreation of the book, which and I'm pretty sure that I'm guilty of that too. But there's also something fun about having differences between the two. Like, you have to have some differences between the two because they're completely different mediums. But mediums, they're completely different things. But I do like the fact that it feels a little different, but then when there are those overlaps, like the catchphrase, that you just get excited. You're like, oh, I know that thing. It feels familiar. So I do like that about it. And I'm probably gonna try and be better about not judging how faithful a book is when it's translated into a movie, or how faithfully a movie depicts a book. Because I'm sure that I've done that, especially probably with Lord of the Rings, or probably more accurately, like The Hobbit. I'm sure that I had some negative words about it, but you can't like translate them exactly. And yeah, maybe some of them take like more wild deviations than needs to happen. But I think it is fun because you get two stories out of it. You get the story from the movie and you get the story from the book, and then when you read the book or you watch the movie, you can you get a little different experience. So I like that. But I do like that he said the thing, because it feels familiar that way. Absolutely inconceivable? Absolutely, totally, and in all other ways inconceivable, the Sicilian reassured him. Why do you ask? No reason, the Spaniard replied. It's only that I just happened to look back, and something is there. They all whirled. Something was indeed there. Less than a mile behind them, across the moonlight, was another sailing boat, small, painted what looked like black, with a giant sail that billowed black in the night, and a single man at the tiller. A man in black. The Spaniard looked at the Sicilian. It must just be some local fisherman out for a pleasure cruise, alone, at night, through shark-infested waters. There is probably a more logical explanation, the Sicilian said, but since no one in Gilder could know yet what we've done, and no one in Florin could have gotten here so quickly, he is definitely not, however much it may look like it, following us. It is coincidence and nothing more. He's gaining on us, the Turk said. That is also inconceivable, the Sicilian said. Before I stole this boat we're in, I made many inquiries as to what was the fastest ship on all of Florin Channel, and everyone agreed it was this one. You're right, the Turk agreed, staring back. He isn't gaining on us. He's just getting closer, that's all. It is the angle we're looking from and nothing more, said the Sicilian. Buttercup could not take her eyes from the great black sail. Surely the 3 men she was with frightened her. But somehow, for reasons she could never begin to explain, the man in black frightened her more. All right, look sharp, the Sicilian said then, just a drop of edginess in his voice. The cliffs of insanity were very close now. The Spaniard maneuvered the craft expertly, which was not easy, and the waves were rolling in toward the rocks now, and the spray was blinding. Buttercup shielded her eyes and put her head straight back. staring up into the darkness toward the top, which seemed shrouded and out of reach. Then the humpback bounded forward, and as the ship reached the cliff face, he jumped up, and suddenly there was a rope in his hand. Buttercup stared in silent astonishment. The rope, thick and strong, seemed to travel all the way up the cliffs. As she watched, the Sicilian pulled at the rope again and again, and it held firm. It was attached to something at the top. A giant rock, a towering tree, something. Fast now, the Sicilian ordered. If he is following us, which of course he is not within the realm of human experience, but if he is, we've got to reach the top and cut the rope off before he can climb up after us. Climb? Buttercup said. I would never be able to. Hush! The Sicilian ordered her. Get ready, he ordered the Spaniard. Sink it, he ordered the Turk. And then everyone got busy. The Spaniard took a rope, tied Buttercup's hands and feet. The Turk raised a great leg and stomped down at the center of the boat, which gave way immediately and began to sink. Then the Turk went to the rope and took it in his hands. Load me, the Turk said. The Spaniard lifted Buttercup and draped her body around the Turk's shoulders. Then he tied himself to the Turk's waist. Then the Sicilian hopped, clung to the Turk's neck. All aboard, the Sicilian said. This was before trains, but the expression comes originally from carpenters loading lumber, and this was well after carpenters. With that, the Turk began to climb. It was at least 1,000 feet, and he was carrying the 3, but he was not worried. When it came to power, nothing worried him. When it came to reading, he got knots in the middle of his stomach, and when it came to writing, he broke out in a cold sweat, and when addition was mentioned, or worse, long division, he always changed the subject right away. But strength had never been his enemy. He could take the kick of a horse on his chest and not fall backward. He could take a 100-pound flour sack between his legs and scissor it open without thinking. He had once held an elephant aloft, using only the muscles in his back. But his real might lay in his arms. There had never, not in 1,000 years, been arms to match Fezzik's, for that was his name. The arms were not only gargantuan and totally obedient and surprisingly quick, they were also, and this is why he never worried, tireless. If you gave him an axe and told him to chop down a forest, his legs might give out from having to support so much weight for so long, or the axe might shatter from the punishment of killing so many trees. But Fezzik's arms would be as fresh tomorrow as today. And so, even with the Sicilian on his neck, and the princess around his shoulders, and the Spaniard at his waist, Fezzik did not feel in the least bit put upon. He was actually quite happy, because it was only when he was requested to use his might that he felt he wasn't a bother to everybody. That's kind of sad. I've always had a soft spot for Fezzik anyway. He was cool. Up he climbed, arm over arm over arm, 200 feet now above the water, 800 feet now to go. More than any of them, the Sicilian was afraid of heights. All of his nightmares, and they were never far from him when he slept, dealt with falling. So this terrifying ascension was most difficult for him, perched as he was on the neck of the giant. Or should have been most difficult, but he would not allow it. From the beginning, when as a child he realized his humped body would never conquer worlds, he relied on his mind. He trained it, fought it, brought it to heel. So now, 300 feet in the night and rising higher, well, he should have been trembling. He was not. Instead, he was thinking of the man in black. There was no way anyone could have been quick enough to follow them. And yet from some devil's world that billowing black sail had appeared. How? How? The Sicilian flogged his mind to find an answer. But he found only failure. In wild frustration he took a deep breath, and, in spite of his terrible fears, he looked back down toward the dark water. The man in black was still there, sailing like lightning toward the cliffs. He could not have been more than a quarter mile from them now. Faster, the Sicilian commanded. I'm sorry, the Turk answered meekly. I thought I was going faster. Lazy, lazy, spurred the Sicilian. I'll never improve, the Turk answered, but his arms began to move faster than before. I cannot see too well because your feet are locked around my face, he went on. So could you please... So could you tell me, please, if we're halfway yet?" "A little over, I should think," said the Spaniard from his position around the giant's waist. "You're doing wonderfully, Fezzik." "Thank you," said the giant. "And he's closing on the cliffs," added the Spaniard. No one had to ask who he was. 600 feet now. The arms continued to pull over and over. 620 feet. 650. Now faster than ever. 700. "He's left his boat behind," the Spaniard said. "He's jumped onto our rope. He's starting up after us." "I can feel him," Fezzik said, "his body weight on the rope." "He'll never catch up," the Sicilian cried. "Inconceivable." "You keep using that word," the Spaniard snapped. "I don't think it means what you think it does." "How fast is he at climbing?" Fezzik said. "I'm frightened," was the Spaniard's reply. The Sicilian gathered his courage again and looked down. The man in black seemed almost to be flying. Already he had cut their lead 100 feet, perhaps more. "I thought you were supposed to be so strong," the Sicilians shouted. "I thought you were this great mighty thing, and yet he gains." "I'm carrying 3 people," Fezzik explained. "He has only himself, and—" "Excuses are the refuge of cowards," the Sicilian interrupted. He looked down again. The man in black had gained another 100 feet. He looked up now. The cliff tops were beginning to come into view. Perhaps 150 feet more, and they were safe. Tied hand and foot, sick with fear, Buttercup wasn't sure what she wanted to happen. Except this much she knew. She didn't want to go through anything like it again. "Fly, Fezzik," the Sicilian screamed. 100 feet to go. Fezzik flew. He cleared his mind of everything but ropes and arms and fingers, and his arms pulled and his fingers gripped and the rope held taut, and "He's over halfway," the Spaniard said. "Halfway to doom is where he is," the Sicilian said. "We're 50 feet from safety, and once we're there, I untie the rope." He allowed himself to laugh. 40 feet. Fezzik pulled. 20. 10. It was over. Fezzik had done it. They had reached the top of the cliffs, and first the Sicilian jumped off, and then the Turk removed the princess, and as the Spaniard untied himself, he looked back over the cliffs. The man in black was no more than 300 feet away. "It seems a shame," the Turk said, looking down alongside the Spaniard. "Such a climber deserves better than—" He stopped talking then. The Sicilian had untied the rope from its knots around an oak. The rope seemed almost alive, the greatest of all water serpents, heading at last for home. It whipped across the cliff tops, spiraled into the moonlit channel. The Sicilian was roaring now, and he kept at it until the Spaniard said, "He did it." Wait, the Sicilian... Okay. The Sicilian was roaring now, and he kept at it until the Spaniard said, "He did it." "Did what?" The humpback came scurrying to the cliff edge. "Release the rope in time," the Spaniard said. "See?" He pointed down. The man in black was hanging in space, clinging to the sheer rock face, 700 feet above the water. The Sicilian watched, fascinated. "You know," he said, "since I've made a study of death and dying and am a great expert, it might interest you to know that he will be dead long before he hits the water. The fall will do it, not the crash." The man in black dangled helpless in space, clinging to the cliffs with both hands. "Oh, how rude we're being," the Sicilian said then, turning to Buttercup. "I'm sure you'd like to watch." He went to her and brought her, still tied hand and foot, so that she could watch the final pathetic struggle of the man in black 300 feet below. Buttercup closed her eyes and turned away. "Shouldn't we be going?" the Spaniard asked. "I thought you were telling us how important time was." It is, the Sicilian nodded. "But I just can't miss a death like this. I could stage one of these every week and sell tickets. I could get out of the assassination business entirely. Look at him. Do you think his life is passing before his eyes? That's what the books say." "He has very strong arms," Fezzik commented, "to hold on so long." "He can't hold on much longer," the Sicilian said. "He has to fall soon." It was at that moment that the man in black began to climb. Not quickly, of course, and not without great effort. But still, there was no doubt that he was, in spite of the sheerness of the cliffs, heading in an upward direction. "Inconceivable!" the Sicilian cried. The Spaniard whirled on him. "Stop saying that word! It was inconceivable that anyone could follow us, but when we looked behind, there was the man in black. It was inconceivable that anyone could sail as fast as we could sail, and yet he gained on us. Now this too is inconceivable, but look, look!" And the Spaniard pointed down through the night. "See how he rises." The man in black was indeed rising. Somehow, in some almost miraculous way, his fingers were finding holds in the crevices, and he was now perhaps 15 feet closer to the top, farther from death. The Sicilian advanced on the Spaniard now, his wild eyes glittering at the insubordination. "I have the keenest mind that has ever been turned to unlawful pursuits," he began, "so when I tell you something, it is not guesswork, it is fact. And the fact that the man in black is not following us. A more logical explanation would be that he is simply an ordinary sailor who dabbles in mountain climbing as hobby, who happens to have the same general final destination as we do. That certainly satisfies me, and I hope it satisfies you. In any case, we cannot take the risk of his seeing us with the princess, and therefore one of you must kill him." "Shall I do it?" the Turk wondered. The Sicilian shook his head. "No, Fezzik," he said finally. "I need your strength to carry the girl. Pick her up now and let us hurry along." He turned to the Spaniard. "We'll be heading directly for the frontier of Gilder. Catch up as quickly as you can once he's dead." The Spaniard nodded. The Sicilian hobbled away. The Turk hoisted the princess, began following the humpback. Just before he lost sight of the Spaniard, he turned and hollered, "Catch up quickly." "Don't I always?" the Spaniard waved. "Farewell, Fezzik." "Farewell, Inigo," the Turk replied. And then he was gone, and the Spaniard was alone. Hi there. Thanks for joining our book club. If you'd like to join the conversation, I would love it if you would leave us a comment. And if you'd like to see more, check out the playlist.